All right, so this is 2 tubes off of the Super 73 Scout 1. This is the Rose Ave edition. We've had 4 flat tires in about a week and a half, and we've determined what the problem is. So if you look at the tire right there, it looks like there's almost like a paper cut. So we'll be out riding and the back tire will go flat, and it's consistently the back tire. So if you come over here, moves there, the rim tape that rides around the edge right here gets a hold of the tube, and there's a little bit of shifting that happens there, and it basically is creating a paper cut over a period of time. And it's always popping in the same spot towards the rim. We're not getting any punctures in the tire itself, but obviously it's a problem. I've already fixed the other bike that we have by taking the rim tape off and trimming a little bit off of the edge. And then after I trim a little bit off the edge, I use Gorilla Tape to wrap back around the rim to secure the rim tape to the actual rim. And that has been a perfect fix for this. I'm sure other people have had the same problem, but just a heads up, the rim tape is being cut too wide and it's causing paper cuts on tubes. All right, so now that we have the popped inner tube in here, I'm gonna show you guys how to change a flat on one of these Lithium Cycles. If you don't have a bike rack, I like to loosen up the brakes up here, just so they don't hit the floor. And I basically turn the bike upside down on a couple pieces of wood here, and I use the wood to help the bike sit off the ground because I don't want the module right here for the electronics to touch the floor. So these boards just give me, these are 1x4s, it just gives me enough clearance. After you flip the bike over, you got a couple nuts on the back. These are 21 millimeter, so you use a ratchet for this, or you can use the wrench that was supplied with the bike. But we're basically going to loosen these up, and you want to pay close attention to this nut right here. There's a little washer that goes in there, and it slips into the frame. This basically keeps the bike from the whole motor assembly here from spinning, right? So that just locks it in. So pay attention to the way that these things come off on each side. So I'm just going to loosen them up here. And then this piece slides off. There's also another washer that goes to the inside of the frame, which is easier to see on this other side. I'll loosen that one up. And now that I have both of those off, you can basically slide this whole assembly forward. I'm just gonna put my foot right there on the back, slide it forward and pull it up, and then you can temporarily remove the chain so you get the tire out. So you want to disconnect the power system right here. There's 2 arrows on this that line up. It might be hard to see them in this light, but there's a couple arrows there. You'll line those back up when you plug it in. Be very careful with these. You don't want to bend these terminals, but there's basically 2 zip ties right here, and you just need to clip those off. Just be really careful that you don't actually clip the cable itself. And once those are clipped off, then this whole piece will finally lift off right here. And then the washers that I was mentioning, they're right here and right there. And you want to make sure that those go to the inside of the frame. So now that the tire is off, what I can do is I can just reach in the rim right here and start pulling the tire out. And once you get the tire out like that, then you can take your valve stem. We're going to unscrew that. Then we're just going to push this through, and I can pull the inner tube out. Now this one's still got a little bit of air left in it. So there's various methods for figuring out where the tear is in your tube. You can inflate your tube in some water and look to see where bubbles are coming out. It's usually pretty easy to find. I just have a Schwinn bike pump here. I'm gonna start pumping it up, and I haven't assessed this tube yet, but my guess is that it's the same type of tear that I've experienced in my other 4 flats, which is that paper cut looking tear. And I can hear it. And sure enough, right there it is. You'll see that striation. It looks kind of like a paper cut. That piece of the tube rides right here on the edge of this rim tape. And that's what's causing the paper cut. So at this point, what we need to do is we need to get the tire all the way off, so you can pull the tire all the way off. And then the rim tape right here just has a Velcro feature, and we just release that, and we're going to pull it all the way off and set the rim to the side for a moment. So I just have a pair of scissors here. I'm not sure what this is made of, some type of plastic cloth material, but you can kind of see where the little bend is there on the side, where it's kind of wrapped up on the lip of the rim, and it's causing that paper cut. So we need to make sure that we trim that away. But, you know, be cautious. We don't want to trim too much away, because the rim tape's very important to cover up where the spokes actually come through the rim here. There can be some little burrs right here that could pop your tube, and that's the purpose of this, is to really protect your tube from hitting any of those burrs. So what I like to do is I like to start down here at this end, and I just take off about 1/8 inch or so off of each side, and you'll see how when I trim this off, I'm making sure that the indentations where the holes are still in the main piece. We don't want to trim that stuff away. And we'll just go down the side here. Now we're going to go down the other side. I'm going to flip it around backwards the other way, since I'm right-handed. Alright, now that it's trimmed, you'll have these excess pieces. You can simply discard of those. We don't need them any longer. We're going to take our rim. We're going to put our rim tape back on. You're going to look for that valve hole right there. That's where this piece lines up. We're simply going to pull this guy back around, and we try to get it in the same spot, you know, line up the holes. I have some dirt on the holes there so I can line it back up. But Velcro that back down, and now you can see that the rim tape actually fits within these lips, and it's not going to ride up on the edge where your inner tube inflates and cause that paper cut. So at this point, what we need to do is we just need to wrap this with the Gorilla Tape. And so why use Gorilla Tape as opposed to getting additional rim tape? Well, it's super strong. It's obviously adhesive. And this was recommended to me from a bike technician at a Trek bike shop. They use Gorilla Tape as rim tape on all of their wheels, and they really don't have any issues with them. So what I like to do is I just like to start a piece and get close to the edge right here, and I'm not really trying to like tape it to the rim. I'm simply just trying to cover up that edge to keep it from creeping back up on the edge of the rim. And so if you wrap this tight enough, you can do just that. And so I'll just start a piece of tape right there and kind of feed it into the edge, and slowly start going around, paying attention to that edge right there, because that's really what we want to cover up. Now that that piece is kind of wrapped up, I like to just get a rag. I just kind of run it around the edge there and make sure that we're getting that edge really nice and tight. Tape doesn't stick extremely well to the actual rim tape that's around the rim, so don't worry about that. It'll stick over time as your tube inflates and kind of pushes the tape against the rim tape. And now that I have one edge wrapped around, you'll notice that I did cover up the actual hole right here. I'm gonna run another piece of tape around this edge, and that's gonna cover up the valve stem hole a second time. And then we'll simply go back through with an X-Acto knife and cut that out once we get it wrapped around. So we don't want to pinch the valve stem. So I'm gonna wrap one more piece around here. Now I should state that I have not had this problem on the front tire. I've only had it on the back tire. And it might be because that's where most of the weight is kind of distributed from the rider. I don't know. I'm not an expert on it, but it took me a while to kind of figure out what this exact problem was and why we keep experiencing flats. On my other Scout S1, which is not the Reassembly edition, I had to do the same thing because I was experiencing multiple flats, and I haven't had any issues since doing this with flat tires. It's been great. The tire pressure holds nice, no flats, nothing awkward about it. Rides as normal, as expected. Just clip that one off. That tape in there. And again, I just take my rag and I kind of make sure that that is nice and tight there in the edge. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Just get it in there as good as you can. And now what we're going to do is we're going to locate that valve hole again, which is right there on the inside. And I'm simply going to take an X-Acto knife and trim that out. So now that I have cut a small hole in here, you can use an X-Acto knife, and it doesn't have to look pretty or anything like that, guys. Just, trim it out. Now I still have my flat tube here, so I'm just grabbing my flat tube here and I'm taking the valve stem and I'm sticking it through the hole just to make sure that I did trim enough out to get the valve stem in there. And it looks like I did. So I can remove that. I don't need that tube anymore. It's trash. And so is the excess tape over here. And now at this point, we're about ready to get our new tube and put back on the rim. And so what we'll do is get our new tube. And I just get these Sunlight tubes. They're $16.99. They're on Amazon Prime. I'll put a link in the description for it. But they Lithium Cycles for these bikes, the Scout S1. These take 20 by 4 1/4 fat tire tubes. So again, they're $16.99 on Amazon Prime. So we're gonna open one of these guys up. We're gonna find the valve stem. Remove the cap, hook this up to our pump, and I don't want to air it up all the way. I just want to air it up enough to get its shape. We still need to insert it into the actual frame here, and I'm actually all twisted up here, so there we go. So that's good. It's just enough for me to still get it inside of the tire. So I'll set this to the side for a moment. Then we're gonna take our tire, and this part's important. You wanna pay attention to the tread direction on this. If you're curious which way this tire goes back on, just take a look at the tire on the front of the bike. So you'll see that the tread direction should match the same. And so you'll see that I actually have this tire backwards. So it actually needs to go like this. So once your tire is like that, you'll make sure that your motor and disc brakes, or the disc brake side of the rim, is facing towards the side of the bike that it goes back on, and we're just going to insert this tire back on here. And I just simply pull it over the rim with my hands. They do make tools for this type of thing, but there's enough give in the tire here that you can just pull it over with your hand. Okay, now that that side is on, what I'll do is I'll locate that valve stem hole, which is right here. We're going to take our new tube, we're going to place the valve stem through the hole, and the goal here is to make sure that the valve stem is perpendicular to the rim, right? We don't want the valve stem sideways or at an angle, because then you could experience a tear around the valve stem. And I simply just take this, we're going to tuck the tube into the tire, and we're slowly going to go around the rim, being careful to not pop the tube or anything like that. We're just going to insert that into our tire and onto our rim, like so. We'll come back around here and make sure the valve stem is nice and perpendicular to this. And then we're gonna start putting the rest of the tire back on the rim. And again, I like to use my hand for this. I know there's tools out there for this, but you really want to be careful with those types of tools, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to run a tool in there and score your tire or anything like that, because then you might have to replace it. Put our pump back on. Start airing it up. And as you air it up, pay attention around the tire. We want to make sure we're not pinching the tube. Good so far. And as you air it up, the tire will start to flare out and actually seed with the rim. And when it starts to do that, I just take a moment to take a look around the rim and make sure that nothing is pinched. I want to make sure that that valve stem is nice and exactly where we want it. And you'll see that mine right now is at a slight angle, so I just need to spin the tube just a little bit. So I have some air in there right now. What I'll do is I'll release a little bit of that air, and I just use one of the Allen wrenches that came with the tools with the kit. Just push that in a little bit. Get that guy straightened out. So now he's nice and perpendicular to the rim. Put this back on. Keep airing it up. Now, Lithium Cycles recommends that you run between 20 and 30 PSI with a maximum of 35 PSI on these bikes. I like to put around 25 in mine. So it's nice and firm right now, but it's definitely still low on air pressure. I got it aired up enough to remount it back to the bike. So we're not going to check the air pressure quite yet. We're going to get it back on the bike. So the important thing to remember when you put it back on the bike is that the wire that comes out of the motor, it needs to be facing up, because then it feeds back through these little pieces with zip ties and it gets plugged back into your power. So what you'll do is you'll pay attention to the disc brake here and make sure that it gets inserted correctly into this piece. So if you set this guy down in here, keep an eye on that, but it's also important that this washer right here goes to the inside of the frame. And there's one on each side, so you pay attention to both sides and you want to drop it in there. But before you drop in this side, obviously you got to put the chain back on the receiving piece here on the rim. And so that's on. That's on. And it goes in there flat like that. And then it simply slides back into these grooves. Just like that. And now we'll take this piece and it goes to the inside like this. And that goes back on. We're not going to tighten it down quite yet. And then of course we'll put the other side on as well and make sure that that piece is inserted into the frame right there to keep the tire from rotating. Put this on and do a hand tighten. So you notice there's a little bit of slide back and forth here. What's important is that the tire is actually on there straight. We don't want it sideways. So you can do this and I can hear a little bit of strain right here on this. So this needs to be adjusted ever so slightly so it's free moving. I'm just going to hand tighten this again. Give it a little spin. That looks good. Once we've determined that the tire is nice and straight, we're going to tighten up these nuts. And I believe in the instructions it says 25 pounds of torque on these. I don't have a torque wrench, so, but I'm a pretty big dude, so I know that I'm putting more than 25 pounds of torque on this, so I can, you know, rest assured that the tire is not going to fall off while I'm riding. So that's good on that. And now we'll take this part, and this feeds right back in here. And remember, we want to match arrow to arrow, and we're simply just going to plug this in. And now my power is reconnected. Now before I put zip ties back on this thing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the bike on, and we're going to make sure that everything is good. So should be on. Just give it a little bit of throttle. And then we'll also want to check to make sure that the brake works. Yep. Pedals look good. And now that all this assembly is nice and tight, we're going to locate that valve stem again, and we're going to finish putting the appropriate amount of tire pressure in. And so again, Lithium Cycles recommends between 20 and 30 PSI of tire pressure for the front and the back tire. Just have the typical tire pressure gauge. This will tell me how many PSI I currently have in the tube. So we're going to check it really quick. I'm only about like 12, so we're not anywhere close to where we need to be. We need to keep airing it up. And if you're not pouring sweat like me at this point, then you're not working hard enough. Check again, we're at 17. Now we're around 22, 23, which is perfect for this. Put that off the side. Take your valve stem and put it back on. And then be very careful. You want to flip my bike back around, put the kickstand down so I don't scratch my hardwoods. I'm going to take that and put down, and then I'll use the Allen wrench that came with the bike, which I think this is the wrong one. This one. And then we'll just want to tighten up the brakes on the bottom. Now on the Rose Ave, the brake piece to tighten it is right here, but on the black and white Scout S1, there's 2 screws back here that you'll want to tighten. So remember, kids, righty tighty, lefty loosey. Brake feels good. And I just try to even them out here, about right there. Take this. Tighten that back down. Give it a try. Now after you get everything mounted on there and you've checked to make sure that your tire's good, you got the right tire pressure, you've plugged your power back in, what we want to do is we just want to take a couple new zip ties and we're going to zip tie the power wire back on here. And so it's a pretty simple procedure here that just feeds through this little hole right here. And so that's the first one. And then we also have a second one right here. Same thing, pay attention to the direction so you get that little knob on it to the outside. We're gonna do that. And then make sure that those are nice and tight. Trim off your excess. And that's it. So if you guys are experiencing flats and the tear is happening on the inside of the rim, it's most likely that the rim tape that Lithium Cycles put on it is too wide and it's just rubbing on there and causing a paper cut over a long period of time. So I hope that this video helps you out. Later.